Welcome to the training webinar for this episode. We're going to have to make some changes to what I've been doing. I've been trying to build as I talk, and this webinar keeps getting longer and longer and longer. The first time I gave it, I did it in 3 weeks. The last time it took me 4. And now we're going to be hard pressed to finish in 4 because I'm getting into a whole bunch of best practices details, and having to do that and to build at the same time are putting a big burden on us. So let's try to speed it up just a little bit and use the pre-built version I have, and we'll just go through and look at the configurations, and we'll talk about why things are configured the way that they are by looking at the completed application. I think that might help speed us up and keep this webinar from expanding to 5 episodes, which it still may, we'll see. But let's kick this off by, let's resize my screen so it fills up the entire Zoom sharing window. There we go. We are still on the form. We have finally, however, talked about all of the basic things that we need to do to get a form working initially. Now let's talk about some of the optional things that we need. And on the form, there's really only 2 of them that you need to consider anytime that you're building any sort of application for your form. One is the milestones and journal control. You may or may not need a milestone/journal control. I think the actual name is the journal control. Milestones are what get displayed in it. I just did a couple of weeks ago an entire webinar on the journal control and milestones, so there's no reason for us to get deep into the weeds here about their use, except to say, if you have any form where you want people to have a discussion on the form, it is best to use a journal control for those discussions. The control that existed prior to the journal control was called the comment log control. That control, I guess, is fine, and if all you care about is just recording comments here and there, I suppose you can still use it. There's no problem with it. It's just a legacy control. Its configuration is kind of ugly looking on the form, I think, so it's not the most visually attractive control at runtime, but it does the job. It allows you to accept comments. The journal control does a way better job of collecting comments if you are wanting to have discussions, because the journal control enables threaded discussions in your form, and you can see who made the discussion and when, and you can follow the path of the discussion, because as you reply, the discussions get threaded. So we would recommend the journal control rather than the comment log control in any scenario where you want to take user comments and where those comments might result in some form of back and forth discussion, and you want to be able to track each of those discussions separately. It's just much easier to follow in the journal control, because all the comment log control does is just lay out a chronological list of comments that were received. So if you're having any sort of discussions, it's hard to follow. The second important thing about the journal control is that it does record milestones. And as we say in that webinar, what milestones are really business events, not so much process events. We know what process events are occurring. We know that activity 1 has concluded. We know that activity 2 is now started. We know where we are in the process itself. But while the process models a real-life business process, the process itself often does not specify when important milestones have been reached in the process, and we would define these important milestones as business relevant milestones that have occurred. So perhaps you have a process where you've got the initial approval which goes through, say, a supervisor and a department head and what have you. And then you might have to send that over to the legal team for a legal review. And then once that is done, you may have to send it over to a customer and have the customer review it and comment. And then when it comes back, you might have a change process where you incorporate changes that the customer has requested. So you've really got four things happening. You've got internal approval, legal review, customer review, and then change and perhaps change approval. So you've got actually four different things that are happening. And they may be happening in sequence. And theoretically, if you have an activity called customer review, okay, well, you know I'm in the customer review stage. But there's also a business event that says the internal initial approval has been completed, right? It's gone through your initial approval through the chain of command, whatever it may be. It's gone through approval by legal, and now you're going to send it to the customer. So what has really happened is there are really three major events that are occurring, even though you have four parts of your process timeline. So your four process timeline parts are your internal review and legal review, then customer review, and then changes from customer comments. Okay, great. Those are four different things, but two of those things, your initial review and your legal review, are sort of all part of the big internal review process. And so once you've completed that internal review and you've sent it off to the customer, you may have reached a business milestone, which is sent to customer for approval. And so that's your big business milestone, and it's not really specifically spelled out in the process itself. The process takes place at a sort of a much more granular level of detail. So if you have these business events, you can create milestones for them, and those milestones can be based on any evaluable condition. In the example I've just given, it's the fact that you've sent it off to the customer. You've now reached a milestone, and you may want to record that milestone, and the way to record a milestone and display it is to place it in the journal control. But you may reach a milestone because certain data has been entered into the form, or, and this is why I said passed a minute ago, because my mind was getting ahead of my mouth, a certain amount of time may have passed, and so therefore you've reached a milestone that says you should be at this point in the process because X amount of time has passed. You either are or you are not, and so you have a milestone that is a business related milestone that is somewhat divorced from the process itself. So milestones are what you place in the journal control as well. It's perfectly possible to have a journal control where you do not take user comments. You just record milestones. It's possible just to have user comments and to have no milestones. It's possible to have a journal control for each, one for milestones and one for user comments. So the journal control serves a lot of really important purposes on almost any sort of application that you create. Certainly, if you're going to have any sort of discussion and if you're going to track milestones, you're going to have a journal control on the form because you can track all of those milestones and you can see whether you have reached them at the appropriate time or not. So please refer to the milestones webinar for the rather lengthy discussion on how to create and configure milestones and also how to record user comments in those milestones. Also on the form, we have to worry about approvals and how approvals are going to be done. Now, we're going to get much more into detail on that in a little bit when we take a look at the process timeline. And one of the things that you often need is to collect signature comments from the people who are completing the process. So you can require users to make signature comments. It's often a good idea, especially if someone is going to deny a request. One of the most common things you want to do is if somebody is going to deny any sort of request, you need some justification for them for that denial, and you need to be able to record that justification. That is what the signature comments control does. One big misconception about the signature comments control is that it is a form control. It is not a form control. It is not really a data entry control. Its behavior, first of all, is very strange. The signature comments control will not even appear on the form unless you are in the context of a task that is assigned to you. And otherwise, on a new form instance, or if you're just reviewing the form or what have you, the signature comments control simply doesn't appear. Now, you can certainly force it to appear in its field properties. It does have, its display option. You can make it visible. However, by default, it only shows up whenever you have a signature comment to make. So if you have a task assigned to you and you're in the context of that task, then the signature comments control will appear for you. For all other people outside the context of that task, the signature control doesn't appear. So it has its own built-in behavior to only show up when it's supposed to show up. Also, as I said, it looks like a form control, it acts like a form control, but it is not a form control because signature comments are not saved with the form. Signature comments are not form data. They are timeline activity data, and they can only be retrieved, say, in a knowledge view, which is where you most often would want to retrieve them, by referring to the timeline. You can't just grab them as a form field. And indeed, if you go into the form fields in the columns tab of a knowledge view, you're not going to see signature comments, no matter what you call it, because it's not a form field. As I said, it is a timeline activity field. So the only way that you can grab signature comments out and display them, for example, in a knowledge view, is by using the activity users complete system variable. That system variable is one that you're going to have to manually enter as a system variable in a column for a knowledge view. And more specifically, you're going to have to use the highlighted modifier here, which says format equals comments. Normally, activity users complete will return just a list of the users who have completed an activity. To get it to show you their comments, you have to add the format equals comments modifier on that system variable so that the comments are displayed instead of just the user's name, which is what is normally displayed. You can also make it even more specific. You can put format equals comments and also add the result modifier, which is another optional modifier, which enables you to specify a single result and to only show the signature comments for that result. For example, if you have a signature comments control on a form, as we do in the example we were just looking at, and let's say that you want those signature comments mandatory for anyone who chooses the deny result. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Somebody can't deny your request without leaving a comment. But what if you have multiple people assigned and 3 of the people approve it and they leave comments, but only 1 person denied it? And of course, they were required to leave a comment, so they did. When you run your knowledge view, you may simply not care about the comments for people who approved the activity when they were completing their task. You really only care about the deny result for that task. So in that case, you might want to set result name equals deny and then format equals comments in your knowledge view so that you only see the comments that are the really important ones, the ones that you're requiring before they deny a result. So you can just ignore all of the comments for the approve result and just not show them and only show the denial comments. So this is the way that you get the comments back from a comment log control on the form. And it is a not uncommon tech support question for people to say, hey, I've got a comment control on the form and I'm trying to make a knowledge view, and how do I show the comments? They're not appearing. They show up in the routing slip. Well, the reason that they're not appearing is because you didn't use the system variable to grab them. So it's very important whenever you're using the approver comments, if you want to use those comments, you have to remember that is a timeline activity system variable. It is not a form field, and it does not get displayed as a form field, or indeed even saved with the form itself as form data. So the only way to extract it is by going to the activity users complete to pull their comments. At the bottom of my form, you will note that I have two button areas, and I also have a save control. We'll talk about the save control in a minute. Let's talk about the button area controls. There's a reason there's two button area controls on here. And the reason is, and I need to scroll way over here to the field properties tab so that I can show you. Notice this one is set to hidden, and this one is set to visible. And so, well, I hate having to scroll over to the field properties tab all the time. So that one is visible, one is hidden. I would probably want to have different conditions on here. The reason why I have two is that for this second one here, I'd want to change these conditions for these two activities. Or not activities, but these two controls. So if we go to the field properties for this control, I want this field to be visible most of the time. So I want this field to be visible when, and we can add a couple of conditions here. We can say, I want it visible when it is, let's go with form, but let's go new form instance equals true. Yes. And now I'm going to have to add an or condition. So I want it to be visible if it's a new form instance. So good. I also want it to be visible if I am running in a timeline activity. And so we'll just go with, well, we'll go with process timeline. So we'll go with timeline status. There it is, timeline status. And I want that timeline status to be active. Okay, so great. So now I've got a button here that will appear whenever I am actually either trying to submit a new form or after I've submitted it if my timeline is active. So if either of those two things are true, I'm going to see this result. Now, I haven't really done any weird stuff on this particular one. I'm still showing my cancel button. I'm showing my task complete buttons. I'm showing my OK button with the checkbox down here. I'm showing my cancel button. I'm all perfectly happy here. This is great. But what happens after my process timeline is completed? Well, especially if I have my form set, as we talked about all the way back in week 1, to be read-only after my process timeline is complete, I might want to show something a little bit different on the form as a result button when my process is completed. So if we take a look at this one, the second button area control that I have at the bottom, there is no OK button. Normally, after your activities are all done and your timeline is complete, when you open up a form instance, you'll see two buttons still, OK and cancel. And the OK button, theoretically, is still a submit button. And if you make any changes to the form, theoretically, you could still save the form when you click the OK button. Well, there's an additional security measure, I guess, that you can implement on a form is by having this second button area control here and turn off the OK button. Now, you want to keep the cancel button on, but you don't have to worry about task completion buttons. We're just going to turn those off, and there are no accept buttons, and accept buttons only show up whenever they're relevant, and that will never show up. So the only button that this control is showing is the cancel button. That's the only button that is checked here. And if I go back over here to my field properties and I say field is hidden, I actually want it to be field is hidden when, and I'll click to create the condition, and In this case, we'll just say the timeline status. So we'll go to timeline, and timeline status is complete. And I can also click otherwise visible uh, for it. But in any event, I now have a second button, area control, on the form that will only show a cancel button. And whenever the form is complete and I have a finished form instance and I want to reopen it and take a look at it, I don't even have an OK button. So I have a secondary method which just changes the UI for the end user if the activity is complete to only show a cancel button. And of course, a cancel button is, for all practical intents and purposes, nothing more than a close button. And so that's the button that will show. In fact, what I might want to do is just not call it cancel button. I might want to go back to the cancel button, and my cancel text might just be close or close form or uh, something like that, that just says if my activity is complete or my process timeline is complete and I open up the form, then all I'm going to see is this close button. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm actually going to save and close it real quick. And once we save it, I'm going to look. I don't know if I have any form instances of this activity. So let me go ahead and save it here. We'll go to form instances. I might not have any at all. And if I don't, then, well, I click form. There we go. I did click form instances. And look, I do have some form instances here, one from last year. So now that I open it up, I am still in the, I still have an OK button here. So that must still be active. Let's go back to one of the older ones here. And I still have OK and cancel changes. So let me go back. Let me be sure that I've got this set right. Going back to these old form instances, should. So that shows me everything. And oh, wait a second. Let's be sure that my properties are set. So let's go back to field properties. Let's turn off the, no. Yeah, let's turn off the otherwise visible. And let's go back here to this one. Now I'm just playing around. What I would expect once I made these changes here is for it to also update my, we'll go with otherwise hidden there. What I expect would be for this to change my timeline activities. So let me save and close again. I'm sorry, I said timeline activities. I expect it to change my form template. And so I would expect to be able to go back and find these old forms and pop them open. Okay, well, I'm almost there. Now it's not showing me any button at all, which I guess is fine too. But I want to show my, let's go to the form controls tab, a little bit easier, and button area 2. Timeline status is complete. Otherwise visible. I don't know that those timeline statuses are complete, however. I mean, they should be because I canceled them, but just trying to figure out what I want to see is my just my cancel button on the form. Let's try her again. Okay, still got no buttons showing. So got my configuration wrong somehow. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's not super important. Timeline status complete, otherwise visible. Okay. And button area 1. Timeline status otherwise hidden. Okay. Update. There we go. That should save it. Now we go to form instance. It shows me my form instances. Let's pull one. And we're still not seeing my cancel button. So let me go back and check the configuration again here for button area 2. Um, okay. This is not saving my, doesn't look like it's saving my settings. Okay, well, that looks like it's saved. Okay. Button area 1. We're going to do this one more time. If it doesn't show me both of my buttons. And those are all, I'm assuming those are all complete. So I'm also not opening them in task context, but let's go back. Well, it is not showing me that second button. I'm going to have to troubleshoot this. I have no active timelines. I've got a whole bunch of completed timelines, or at least I should. So those timelines should all be complete. So it is complete, even though these were all admin canceled. They're fine. So let's view the form. All right. Well, I'm not entirely sure what configuration. Oh, field is hidden when timeline status is complete. How about field is visible when timeline status equals complete? How about that? How about saving that property? And now let's look at our old form instances. So the form was, as they tend to do, the form is doing exactly what I told it to do. It was hiding this control when the form is, the timeline activity is complete. So it was doing exactly what I told it to do. Now I've told it to do something different, to show me the button when my timeline is complete. And now that I've told it to do the right thing, it's doing the right thing and it's working the way that I wanted it to work. So the cool thing about this is that now there's no way, even if this form did not have all of the fields disabled, and if it did not have itself set to be read only, it still won't allow me to save because I don't have a button that enables me to save. So I have really got a whole belt and suspenders thing going on here, ensuring that nobody can make any edits to this form except during the time that the form is running, and that they are allowed to make the edits to the form. Let's go back to the form for a little bit and go back up to that previous section that we were looking at that contained the approval comments. This section itself. Now, the way that I have this form built, as we've talked about for the last couple of weeks, all of the fields are read-only unless I am in a new form instance. And so they're all disabled. And what that means is that as I go through the process, if I want to enable those fields, I'm going to have to explicitly set them to be enabled. And as I previously explained, if I have a conflict between the enabling settings that I have at the form level and some lower level, in this case at the section level, then the control at the lowest level wins that enabling conflict. And so as I go through my process, I've really only got two things I want people to be able to do. I want them to be able to, at various times, add their comments. And I obviously want them to be able to approve or disapprove, and also make whatever comments that they need to make on the form in the approval section. So for both of those two sections, I am going to need to set the point of action inside my process of when I want those sections to be readable and when I want them to be visible. So The best thing to do would just be to set the visibility on these as well as the enabling. Although if you want to have the approval and the discussion sections open at all time, that we're at least in the process and after, you can certainly do that. I think in the case of a discussion section like this, you're probably going to want this to be displayed. So we'll show this entire discussion section. We'll set it as visible when, and we don't want it showing up on new form instance, but we do want it showing up at all other times. So I think in this example, what we'd want to do is we would just want to go to new form instance, and we would only show this when new form instance equals no. So this section won't appear whenever I create a new form. It will only appear after I have submitted the form. And we want to do kind of the same thing down here, but we're going to have to add something a little extra. We need to set two properties here. It depends on how you want it to work, and this is where it gets tricky. If I am actually running in the timeline, and I only want this section to show while I'm running in my timeline, then I can do simply, I can just say, all right, that's fine. Let's say this field is visible. Not visible, but is visible when, and we'll create a condition to say it will be visible only when the timeline status is active. So timeline and timeline status is active. On the other hand, I'm not sure I like that either, because that does mean that my approval, well, and this is where you got to kind of think into these things. So with this setting, what's going to happen is this entire section, this whole approval section, it's not going to show up when I have a new form instance. Neither is my discussion section down there. In fact, let's go ahead and run a new instance of the form real quick so that we can look and play with it. And this is a useful thing that you can do whenever you're in your design, is just run and test. Although I think I hit run and I think I hit save and run. I meant to hit save and test, but we're gonna have to wait for wait for it to save. And you may have noticed that I do this sometimes during the webinar too. I'll just create a new instance of the form and I'll just leave it up. And if I make a change in the form template, all I have to do is refresh the form and my change should be immediately reflected in the form template. And so, okay, my milestones and discussions are showing up, which I did not want the discussion section to do. So let's see what mistake I've made in configuration on that. So we'll go here to our discussion section. We'll go to the field properties. Oh, field is visible when new form instance equals no, but we're going to set otherwise hidden so that it only shows up when the new form instance equals no. So I've saved it. There we go. It is saved. So I should be able to refresh. There we go. And that's what I want to see on my form when it first opens. So I should be able to go to paid time off and it'll show me my paid time off stuff. My unpaid leave of absence, not going to show me anything. Complaint is going to show me my complaint info. My review dispute is going to show me my review info. By the way, while we're here looking at this form, I want to go back to something that I didn't cover a few weeks ago when we were talking about the different methods of showing sections on the form. So note that I have this big blank area here between the review dispute dropdown and my review info. Now, if I change it back to paid time off, well, I still have that. Let's go with complaint. Yeah, I still have that. I've got all this extra space there. Why do I have all of this extra space? Well, this is an artifact of using regular section controls because I've still got this spacing. Now, the fact that I'm hiding these controls is not really changing my spacing here. Also, notice that I've got my justification field here, and technically my justification field is actually quite large. So I've got it set to show up as 5 lines. And so I've got this weird space here that is kind of unavoidable. One of the reasons why, however, that initially we talked about using embedded section controls is that if you throw all of your embedded section controls without any lines between them, by the way, I think I did that on the form, so I think we can go back and look at that method of doing it. If we create these forms here with embedded section controls, and I just decide that rather than going to a new line, what I do is I just drop my new embedded section control right here. I don't have to worry about line spacing. If I was to go and drop in a break between my embedded section controls, I've now got a paragraph mark in here. I'm going to get some unavoidable space between my two embedded section controls, and that is going to show up as vertical space on my form. And even though I'm not showing the control itself, it's still going to have the HTML for that paragraph mark, and that paragraph mark is going to have its own spacing. So I'm going to end up with some unwanted spacing on my form. It's a little confusing if you design it this way, where I have, this section here, and then I decide I'm going to end that section. So there's an embedded section end, and then I'm immediately going to go in and throw in another embedded section and throw in some text there. And again, put in my embedded section end right there. I've got a leading space, which I probably would want to get rid of. So it looks kind of odd. But if I'm going to show one of these 3 sections, but I don't want to have a whole bunch of extra vertical empty white space in my form, then you need to jam things together like that with the embedded section. With the section control, not quite as easy, because they do have a visual representation on the page, and you are going to get some, unavoidable vertical space on there if we're showing and hiding. I could probably figure out a way, if I wanted to work around this. Um, what I might do is, rather than having all of these visual sections, I think my primary workaround would be to just throw in the embedded section controls and just have them magically appear inside my submission section as I choose a different review type. And so, just some things to think about in terms of how your form is going to look at runtime, and how you want to display the information. Now, on a real form in the real world, it kind of looks fine because I've got that extra space really taken up. Let me run and test it here again as a truly new instance. So I should be able to edit my request type and my justification. Um, all right, I'm not sure what I've done with that justification field. I apparently have dropped a set display, set required options. Um, okay, I'm not sure why my justification field isn't showing up in this particular one. I don't have any weird options set on it, so I should just be able to see this is a regular input control. Oh, there we go. I've got a problem on this particular version I'm running with the text editor. So we're going to turn that text editor off. I think that's the reason why I'm having that extra space there with the justification. It's trying to show it, but it can't show it because I had it set to text editor. Yes, there we go. Justification and paid time off. There we go. That looks a lot better. If I go to complaint, okay, yeah, that's working. Okay, so that vertical space there was with the it was trying to show this form field, but couldn't show it because I've got my text editor all messed up. So I need to go in and change the configuration I've got on my vars file. And so this is showing up fine at the moment. So we're happy with it whenever we have our different types of disputes. But you at least have to think about your spacing. For these, you may notice that there is no spacing between the controls here, the section controls. They're all jammed up right next to each other, but it's kind of hard to tell that. You often have to go into source, which I may have done to go into source and to make those changes there so that they all run together. Yeah. See, there's only a break control, not a paragraph control in there that are separating these. And so I've got all of these section controls all jammed up together. But I can do that because I can go into the source and I can kind of edit the source and make them all jam up in together. Most of the time you can't, and what you're going to end up doing is creating those extra spaces between them or creating them as paragraphs. And that's hard to fix. Whereas if you use embedded section controls, it has a simpler visual thing on the page, but you can jam those embedded section controls. And I'm pretty sure I didn't save this. I didn't. So uh, once again, to do the exact same thing, I can just start my new embedded section right immediately after the end of the previous embedded section. And that's how I get rid of the spaces if I'm using the embedded section. Like I said, it's a little confusing until you get used to doing it that way, but you don't have to worry about that extra horizontal space as long as you ensure whichever type of section you use, you get them all kind of jammed up there together. All right, let's talk about the save button. The save button is kind of weird the way that it works. And it works the way that it works for technical reasons, or at least what used to be technical reasons and technical requirements. I'm not entirely sure that that is true anymore. And so we may be able to change the way that the save button works. But the save button is a little tricky. First of all, by default, the save button is not going to show up on a new form instance. And so let's run this form again. And that's just how it works by default. You can force it, and we'll force it here in a sec. But by default, I don't get a save button, which means I can't go in and partially fill out my form, especially if I have a really long form. A long form that's going to require extra time. Users might not want to fill it all out at one go. In fact, may not be able to do so because it asks for information they weren't expecting or what have you, whatever the reason might be. Okay, well, then great. Then what we can do is we can add a save button to the form. Unfortunately, by default, the save button does not show up whenever the form is first opened. We have to force it to do so. And unfortunately, by forcing it to do so, we're going to demand a specific behavior, which a lot of people don't like. So let me move my form over here. Let me go to my save button. And I'm going to go to its field properties. Actually, I got to do two things. First off, I got to go to my save button, and I've got to ensure that close form after saving is selected. Then I got to go to my field properties, and I've got to say field is visible. Well, actually, you know what? Yeah, I do have to do it. Field is visible when, which is kind of a pain, but field is visible when, and then I'm going to click to create the condition, and then I'm going to have to force it to be visible on form, new form instance equals true. Now I'm not going to select the otherwise hidden because I don't want it otherwise hidden, but I've got to be sure that I have both form is visible when new form instance is true, and I've got to have the close form after saving set to true. So let's save our form. Uh, where is my mouse? I can't see it on the screen. There we go. Let's save the form. Let's go back here. And I now should be able to refresh. And now I've got a save button. Okay, well, that's fine as far as it goes. But if I click save button, so we'll just go with paid time off. There we go. I'm too busy. I can't fill out the rest of this very complex information. So I'm just going to save. Okay, well, it just submitted my form and it saved and closed the form. There is a technical reason why it works like this, which is that whenever I open a new form instance, no matter what I've said, these are the default values and I want this to be that. So if we look at the top three fields, they'll all be filled in with default values. This looks like a real form, but it isn't because it only exists on my browser or in my browser. This is not a real form yet. It's only a real form once it gets saved. And with the way that .NET used to work with forms like this, is that if I wanted to save the form, I would have to send it back to the server and I would have to save it, which meant I had to close the form to transmit the information all the way back to the server. I'm not sure that that's true now. And we've had, on and off over the years, people who say, look, I just want to save the form just to know that my stuff is saved so that I can continue filling it out. I don't want to have to hit the save button and then ta-da, my form is now submitted. And then I have to now go and reopen the form and continue work. Now, once you have saved the form or submitted the form, so let's go with well, this time I guess we're going to have to use the submit button. Oh, and by the way, let me make a real quick change to that save button. We're going to turn off the close form after saving, and let's run a new version of the form. And I tell you what we're also going to do while this thing runs up. Notice I've got no save button here, but give me a second. I'm going to apologize. But something appears to be upsetting my puppy, so we're going to close all of the doors into this room so that we can keep his racket to a minimum. Again, I apologize for that. But notice I don't have a save button here. The save button will only show up on a new form instance if I go down here and turn on this close form after saving. Now, if I already have submitted my form, then hey, no problem, because, and we'll go ahead and throw this up here and get a new form instance. We'll submit it. So I'm going to have to fill it out and submit the form. So we'll just go with unpaid leave of absence. We'll give it a little justification here. Submit. It should reassign everything to me. So let's give it a second to submit. Okay, now I've got a form instance because I submitted it and it really exists, and a form version number has now been assigned to it on the server. And so I can now save my form. I actually can't now because all the controls are set to disabled. So I'd have to go back in and enable my save button. But okay, fine. I now have a save button, and assuming that the rest of my form wasn't locked down, including this form control, I could go ahead and save my form. Now the save button will display. So the way the save button is set to work is not to display on a new form instance, but once the form has been submitted, you can have the save button appear, and assuming that you set it to be enabled, you can simply save anytime that you want. That is admittedly the exact opposite of how you would like the save button to work. How you would like the save button to work is for it to show up by default whenever you're submitting a new form instance, and for you to be able to just hit save and just to have the form save and to have you move on. That is not how it works. I've got to have that form submission. It's got to go back to Process Director. Process Director has to save all of the information on it, and it has to be assigned a version number on that form so that I know where I am in the save. Now, that's why the close form after saving checkbox has to be checked in order for it to show up on new form instance. I apologize for the fact that it works that way, but that's how it works. And so and look, there's some justification for it. For the most part, if I'm going to create a new form and I'm going to get about halfway through all of the fields that are on it, and I decide, I just want to save it, I'll come back and I'll finish it later. Then this works perfectly fine. I hit save, it saves the form, it closes it, it's out of my face. I can go do whatever else it is that I want to do. And then in my task list, there will be a notification in my task list that says, hey, you have a form that needs to be saved. I probably, if my memory is correct, if I go to my user profile workspace, I should have nope, that was submitted. So I thought I had a saved version, but no, I didn't. I had it on save and test. So it never submitted anything. Oh, I need to put in the comments if I hit deny. So it's denied. This should actually end the whole deal. I guess it doesn't end the whole deal. Let me do that. I'm just trying to get, you know what? It would have been easier just to cancel it from right here, wouldn't it? And I didn't do that. Oh, well, sorry for wasting a little bit of time. In any event, that's how your save function works. I know that you may disagree with it working like that. But a couple of things have changed. So there may be some hope for the future on the save button. In Process Director, I don't know what branch it's in. I don't know if we're going to do it in .400 or in 6.1.500. But there is a new feature that you can now set your forms. So whenever you create a new form, it no longer has to open up like it does now in a brand new window. It's one of the other little irritations. Anytime I create a new form in Process Director, it wants to open it up in a little pop-up window. Now, for me, this is a huge inconvenience because if I want to take screenshots of things, I generally have to, especially for the training, I generally have to right click on here and click show as tab, and then it resizes itself as a tab, as a real browser tab, and it incorporates the tab size that I want and that I have set for the parent window, and it just replicates that. And then I can, for me, I can take my, 1280 by 720 screenshots for the training courses or what have you. We are going to have a new setting to override opening in a new window. And we're going to be able to, we're going to enable a deal so that it will default to opening in a new tab, not in a new window. The reason why it opens up in a new window now is because initially, to make ASP.NET work the way that it worked at the time, that was the requirement. We had to open that form up in a new window. And since we were doing that, we just made it a pop-up window. And now we can open it up in a new tab. So the way that the front end has to work has changed over the years. And so as we are modernizing the product, we may be able to go back in and fix that save thing. And I say fix, but it will be nice. And we're going to investigate it. And I'm not promising because I'm not an engineer and I don't know if they can actually do this. I just know that we're doing stuff that we couldn't do before. So this is something we're going to check into to see if we can show that save button on a new form instance without having to click close form after saving. But that's for the future. For now, if you want that save button to show up in a new form instance, that's the way that it has to work. Final thing on the form. Boy, it's taken a long time to get through this form. The final thing is the routing slip. It is a best practice to have a routing slip at the very bottom of every form. That's why we have the button action, the button area control, so that we can force the buttons to appear above the routing slip. You always want your buttons to appear above the routing slip. You do want a routing slip on every form so that you can, everybody can look and see what the status is of the form and where we are in the process. That's our recommendation. Ideally, you want a routing slip on the form. Some customers, for reasons that, are relevant to them, and I don't have an opinion one way or another, is that they would prefer not to have a routing slip on the form because they would prefer not to display the status of the ongoing activities that are associated with the form. They would rather their users not have access to that information. I'm not going to inquire as to why that may be true. What I will say is that the BP Logix recommendation is generally on, or all of our recommendations are generally on the side of transparency and enabling everyone to know what is happening with the process when it happens. So our recommendation is that you place a routing slip on the form. Our further recommendation is that you place some button area controls on the form so that you can control where the result buttons appear on the form, and thus not force your users to scroll through the routing slip, especially if it's a very long routing slip, just to get to the buttons at the bottom of the form. Because if you do not place your button area controls on the form, then by default, Process Director will automatically place button area controls at the very, very bottom of the form. So if you have a routing slip down here, then those controls, those button area controls are going to show up below the routing slip. And you really be kind. Don't force everybody to scroll through the routing slip. It may not be that big of a deal if there's only like 3 lines on it like this one. If there are 24 lines on it, it becomes a pain to do that much scrolling. So place your button area controls on the form, place them above the routing slip is our recommendation. Also, there's nothing that says you can't place multiple button area controls on a form, and there's nothing that says you can't place them up at the top of the form or near the top of the form so that people don't even have to scroll all the way down through your form to complete it. That's entirely up to you. That's the nice thing about the button area control. You can have as many of them on the form as you want, although at some point your form will begin to look ridiculous with that many button area, with a whole bunch of button area controls on it, but you do have full control over those button area controls. And so with that, we are, I believe, done with the form. We can now get into some of the best practices on the process timeline. For that, we're going to go back to this unconfigured one that I have up here at the top. We're going to be switching back and forth between these things so that I can kind of show things as necessary, but I don't have to rebuild everything from scratch because we have a completed one down here that we can refer to. So on a process timeline, as I said way back in week 1, if you're going to have any sort of approvals and you're going to go through a sequential set of approvals. Best practice is to place it inside an approval loop and to have the approval loop set so that at least one thing, you want to do at least one thing, even if you don't care about looping and you don't expect to restart the loop ever. All you need to worry about is to get out of the loop. You still need to be able to have this cancel the remainder of the loop when the condition is met. That's really the key benefit of the loop. Yes, it is beneficial if you can restart the loop and you can, send it back to your submitter. That's all great, but the really important thing about the approval loop is how do I get out of it? Because ideally, in almost any approval scenario, you don't care all that much about restarting the loop or repeating the loop until a condition is met. The important thing that you want to happen, ideally on any loop, is that it never repeats. We go through it once, and if everybody approves, we complete all of the approvals and we just move on with our timeline. And if somebody denies my request or says, no, it's not going to happen, or whatever the criterion is where we're going to end our approvals, I want to be able to get out of those approvals really easily without having to create a bunch of extra branch activities and a bunch of needed when conditions on subsequent activities or what. I don't want to do any of that. So the real key for the approval loop, even if you're not going to loop at all, is the ability to get out of that loop. Because now I don't have to worry about what's going to happen in subsequent steps. If in step 1, my approver says, yeah, I'm not going to approve this, I'm denying it. Okay, fine. We're going to just end the approval loop completely. And so that's the important thing about the approval loop. Now, it is nice to be able to have this jump back to the top of the loop. That's really cool because what it allows me to do is to account for an initiator resubmittal. So if we go back and look at this timeline here that is configured, I don't have it set up that way. So sorry, I guess we are going to have to come back to this one. So right now I've got these steps. Let me jump ahead a little bit since I don't have a ready example and I'm going to have to create one real quick. Let me jump ahead with how we deal with the loop. So I have a loop. It's called approval loop. By default, on my template, which I use to create all of my new processes on this server, this was created from my template, and my template already has an approval loop and it has 2 approval activities, which are already sequential in it. Now, the names are obviously very generic. I have approval loop, approval 1, and approval 2. First thing I'm going to want to do is probably rename all of these approval activities. Well, I may not want to rename approval loop. I mean, that's a pretty good explanation of what it is. But in this example down here, sorry, we're going to have to switch back and forth a couple of times. In this example down here, all I really have is a set approval, right? I've got my supervisor approval, my manager approval, and then there's going to be some sort of HR action based on my previous approvals and based on whether it actually reaches HR and they're going to do anything at all. So, okay, fine. I've got a basic approval loop here. Now I've renamed the approval loop to approval section. I've renamed these 2 activities, manager approval and supervisor approval. They're both inside the loop. But of course, I'm usually going to need more than 2 approval activities. So if we go back over here and we have to start building our activity, then there's a couple of things that we're going to need to keep in mind. First of all, if I need to add more approvals, I certainly can. However, the way to add them, the way that we recommend that you do it, is to select your approval loop and then create child activity which should create activity 2.3 right here at the bottom. Now, once I've got this activity created, obviously I can just drag and drop it to the activity above it to make it depends on. And I'd probably want to, go in here and change that color to whatever the orange color was that I was using. Well, that wasn't the orange color I was using, but fine. I probably want to, I'm really big. As you can see, I'm really big into setting my own colors here, which we're going to need to talk about in a few minutes when it comes to colors. Um, so now I just do that, and however many these activities I need, I'll just keep hitting create child activities, and then I'll just keep adding the dependencies, and I can build out my approval loop. And great, I'll give them the appropriate names. Now, in the case of the completed example, I don't really care about returning the loop to the beginning, but sometimes you might. So my approval one might not actually be an approval. It might be an initiator resubmittal. And so I might want to return it to the initiator. Now, I don't want the initiator resubmittal to run on the very first run through of this loop. And hopefully there will only be one run through of this loop. So I've got to ensure that the way it's configured now, simply by changing this to initiator resubmittal, here's what's going to happen. The initiator is going to open up the form. They're going to submit it. They're going to see the spinny on the form, and then the form is going to reopen with a task assigned to resubmit this form, which is going to be super confusing. So I want to ensure that this doesn't run in the first time. Because I'm inside a loop, being inside the loop makes a lot of things easier for me. One of which is the conditions I can set on this needed when. Because I can click to create a condition, and probably all I really have to do is say parent activity iterated equals yes. With this needed when condition, now I would never do it just like this. Although in most cases, this is going to work fine and it's never going to cause you any problem. The parent activity has to iterate, which means it has to repeat more than once for parent activity iterated to equal yes. So generally, on the first run through of my process timeline, it's going to skip the initiator resubmittal activity. And the initiator resubmittal activity will only run if somebody restarts the loop. So in this case, we saw the loop is set. So if I put deny as a result, it exits the loop. And if I have any text that says, I believe resubmit, and it will check that condition just to be sure. If I have any result that says resubmit or contains the text resubmit, it will restart my loop. And let me see what my looping is. Yes, any child activity result contains resubmit. I'm going to restart the loop. And of course, if it contains deny, I'm going to end the loop. If I end the loop, obviously it's not going to get iterated. But if I jump back to the top of the loop, means it's going to be iterated. So the first time through, initiator resubmittal shouldn't run. However, I would not rely on just this condition as my activity condition. I think I would add an and condition, because I want to make it explicit that any child activity result, so that means that any of the activity results in this parent loop, if any child activity result contains deny. I could probably use equal here and it would work just as well. But I want to have both of these things be true. Yes, it not only has to be iterated, but one of the child activity results has to be deny. If I do it this way, what that allows me to do is to restart the loop elsewhere and skip the initiator resubmittal, but it allows me to restart the approvals because maybe one of the approvers made a mistake and I need to restart the approvals. And so this allows me to specify, I only want you to run this activity if one of my results is deny. I'm sorry, it can't be deny, can it? It has to be resubmit. My fault. Has to contain resubmit somewhere in it. If it doesn't contain resubmit, but my loop is starting for other reasons other than somebody telling me that I have to resubmit my initial request because there's a problem with it, I don't want to start this activity. Anytime that you are going to restart a loop and you're going to base whether an activity runs on whether the loop restarts or not, your best practice is to make the activity needed when condition as specific as necessary to accomplish what you want to do. So if I set this as my two activities, now remember, this top one is probably going to work fine in most cases, but if I make it a little more explicit, that gives me the freedom as I design my timeline to be able to restart the loop for other reasons. So I might, for example, in this activity down here, say, I don't like the initial whatever happened here in approval 2. I don't like it. I want to have approval 2 readdressed. And so I might have a result that restarts the loop. Now, if I do, I'm obviously going to have to create some more extensive conditions than this, because right now it only works on a resubmit. So I'd probably have to add another one, another add condition, in this case an or condition. And in this case, I'd say any child activity result. So timeline activity, any child activity result. And let's say if I'm going to want to redo an approval, I'm going to say, redo supervisor approval or whatever it may be. Then I can just say any child activity result contains redo. And now I have two conditions under which my loop can restart. Okay, great. So now the way that I have my process timeline configured is that if any approver says resubmit this request, then it's going to restart the loop and my initiator resubmittal is going to run. However, if any approver says, let's redo the approval, it's still going to restart my loop. But because I added in that requirement that my result contain resubmit, even though the loop is restarted, that means the loop has iterated. So that is true. However, the result doesn't contain resubmit. It contains the word redo, which means I'm going to skip initiator resubmittal, but approval 2, which we'll just call, I guess, supervisor approval, it will restart. And in fact, I can make it even more more particular, because on my supervisor approval, I can have a needed when that says, okay, I might have different results at different levels. And we're about to go look at different results at different levels and see at different times when different results get displayed. So let's say at each level, I have a button, a redo button that at the department manager level, it will say redo supervisor approval. And at the branch head level, it might say redo department head approval. Okay, now both of those results say redo, so both of them will cause the loop to redo. but one says supervisor approval and one says department head approval. So on the supervisor approval, I can do a test to whether I want to run this. Now, in this case, I want to run it even whether it is repeated or not. So I don't care about the repetition, but I do need to have it run if any child activity result. So we'll go back to timeline activity. Any child activity result contains supervisor. Or any child activity result, because I do want to run it on a resubmit, timeline activity, any child activity result contains resubmit. So now I've got a condition so that the very first time it runs, we're going to, well, I need another result. I do need it to run on the first run through. So I'm going to need to change these conditions around. We're not really doing a bunch of training on conditions, so I don't need to make it as or timeline activity, parent activity up, sorry, timeline activity, parent activity iterated. I think we're probably getting a little further down into the weeds that we need to, but we'll say no. Okay, so now I've got three conditions that should cover everything. If the parent activity has never iterated, I want to run my supervisor approval activity. If somebody has, oh, that should not be resubmit, supervisor. Okay, yeah, that covers all three possible cases. So the first case, it goes through the very first time. Nobody has resubmit or redo or anything. We're fine. This activity runs because the parent activity hasn't iterated. Great. Somebody restarts the loop. They either hit resubmit, which will start off my initiator resubmittal activity, or they hit redo supervisor approval. That contains the word supervisor. So if it restarts, I still have to run. So there are two instances where my process timeline can restart. Either I hit initiator resubmittal or initiator resubmit, whatever I've called it, as long as it has the word resubmit in it, I'm fine. And then my redo supervisor approval, redo manager approval. So I now have really granular control over when each of these activities runs, which is the other reason why we should be using the approval loop, because now I can determine when and where I want each of my activities inside that approval loop to run. And if I'm going to make ever more complicated approval loops, I can still do everything inside the looping tab of the parent activity and inside the needed when tab for each of my child activities to determine when I want them to run. I don't have to create any branch activities, so I don't have to create a branch activity between each of the approvals to return it to the previous approval step. I can just go through and set my conditions. Now, normally I would be sympathetic to the argument that it might be easier to, I don't know what I've done wrong here. But normally, I'd be sympathetic to the argument that it might be easier just to throw in a branch activity between all of these approval steps, just to have it, if I selected, return to supervisor or redo supervisor approval, whatever verbiage I decide to use. It might be easier to have a branch activity between each of these approval steps and just to say return it to the previous step. That is slightly more efficient than changing those three activities on the needed when tab. I'd be sympathetic to that argument in the past, but on a strictly I'm lazy and I want to do as little work as possible to accomplish result X basis, which is generally how I approach things, we are about to make it possible to copy and paste timeline activities. So that's something we are working on, which means if you have one activity where you have already done your complex needed when conditions that clearly I failed to save whenever I did this, in the future, you're going to be able to click this and to be able just to copy and paste that activity, most likely with an action link at the top, so that you can copy that configuration and then just go back in and make a quick change. So you would change in the three that I forgot to save just now, in the three conditions that I created, where the top one said if the activity contains supervisor, I might just need to go and open that up and change supervisor to department, and that would work just fine. But in general, the loop is the way to go on the activities. So now let's talk about advanced. What time is it? Okay, it's 11:21. Boy, I didn't even look at the time. And let's go back to my advanced form timeline, talk about activities. Now, this sample application that I've created, its purpose is to have a sort of multi-request type process where I have a couple of different requests. I've got a complaint request, I've got two different time off requests, and I've got some review dispute requests. And so all three of these different types of requests are all HR requests. They're all ultimately going to require some sort of HR action. Even if it's just to, log my days off in the calendar, HR has to do something. So I can concatenate all of these requests into a single application instead of having to build four very similar applications to basically do the same thing. And anytime that you can do that, that's a great thing to do. But it does impose a little extra configuration requirement on you when it comes to results. So let's say that I have things working in a slightly different way. So let's say I'm going to make a time off request. Okay, well, for a time off request, it's going to have to go to my supervisor, who's going to be able to approve or deny it. And I'm just going to go ahead and open these two conditions. So for most of the requests that I'm going to submit, my supervisor is either going to approve or deny them. But there's one request type, which is the complaint request type that I have set up here. That's request type 3. I think complaint is request type 3. Let me look at my request types real quick. What is request type 3? Oh, okay, please leave. Please navigate to my request types. Okay, thank you for finally obeying me. So paid time off and unpaid leave, that's time 1 or 2. Complaint is 3, and a review dispute is 4. So complaints and review disputes are going to get handled slightly differently. For the time off request, for all of my activities, it's all going to be straight approve, deny, and then it's going to get to the it's going to get to HR, and they're going to do whatever HR does with time off requests, presumably puts them in some calendar and marks off the number of days that you've taken off, unless you work in an organization like BP Logix where we theoretically have unlimited PTO. Not that I ever take any of it, but complaints, which is going to be a value of 3 on my request type, and review disputes are going to work differently. So when we look into our timeline and we go to our supervisor approval and we go back to his results, my approve and deny are cool. I'm going to have approve and deny for request type 1 or 2. But if it's a complaint, I'm not going to approve or deny that complaint. I'm going to have a different result. That's going to be reviewed. Now, the way that I enforce the different results that I see at each stage in the process is for me to use the show this result button when property and to determine whether or not I'm going to show the button based on the request type it is. So if it is request type 3, which is a complaint, I'm going to show my reviewed button, which is basically the only button I'm going to see. It's just an acknowledgement that I, as the supervisor, have reviewed the request. But I don't get to approve or deny it. I just get to look at it. I'm basically getting a courtesy copy to review as the supervisor. I'm only going to get approve or deny whenever it is request type 1 or request type 2. Now, that accounts for all 3 of the cases in which I am going to participate in the approval process, because there is one approval process in which I am not going to participate, and that is the review dispute. So I, as the immediate supervisor, have given someone a review. They've decided they do not agree with my review, and they're going to dispute it. That's not going to go to me as the supervisor, because technically I may be the cause of the problem. I may not be, but we're just going to assume that because I may be, then I've got a needed win condition on supervisor approval. If it is request type, I'm only going to need this activity if it's any request type other than 4. So for the supervisor, I have 2 results that cover the 2 cases in which I am going to have an activity assigned to me. It's either a time off request, paid or otherwise, or it's a complaint that I'm going to review. At the manager approval level, it gets way more complicated for my results. Now, obviously, I have my approve and deny results. And so if it is request type 1 or request type 2, I'm going to do my regular approve and deny. I didn't mean to close that, sorry. But in point of fact, I have 5 different results. So I have 3 additional to approve or deny. If it is a review dispute, which is request type 4, we're going to skip the supervisor, so he doesn't have a result. But my manager, department head, whatever you call it, they are going to have to be given a courtesy heads up that a review dispute has now been submitted. They don't get to approve or deny it. They don't get to have any input into it at all. All they get to do is review it. So they have a reviewed, but unlike the supervisor approval, where their reviewed result displays if it is a complaint, for the manager, the review result is displayed if it is a review dispute. And so therefore, they get a courtesy notification that one of their employees has a review dispute, but it's actually HR who is going to handle that review dispute. Because now, once you start messing around with people's reviews, you get HR involved. So we're skipping the supervisor. We're going to the manager, giving him a review option, and then it's going to HR. HR are the people who are going to do the work. Now, if it's a complaint, I actually have 2 different results. It can either be internal action, if it is request type 3, that's a complaint, or refer to HR if it is a complaint. So if it is a complaint request type, my supervisor is going to be notified, and they'll be able to review it. Then it's going to go to my manager. My manager is going to have 2 options. He can either say, okay, well, we're going to handle this through internal action. This is really a complaint about something that's going on in a department. Maybe we've done something wrong. Maybe we've made a mistake. Maybe there's something happening that we're not aware of. This is something that we can handle. It doesn't affect anybody's pay or potential employment. Doesn't need to go to HR. There's nothing they can do anyway. It's something I can handle as the manager internally in my department. However, maybe it is not something they can handle internally. Maybe there is some sort of harassment request or something or complaint that is going on. Well, I'm certainly going to want to tell the manager that there is a harassment complaint, but that's going to go to HR. So as the manager, it's not something I'm going to be able to handle through internal action, not usually. Well, I mean, I suppose it could be. I suppose if my immediate action is just to fire somebody for, acting inappropriately, I certainly can do that. But that's probably going to have to go to HR anyway, and HR is certainly probably going to want to receive a notification. But I have the choice. This may not be a realistic set of choices based on the various things that can occur. I'd probably need to work a little more on this, but it does illustrate that for the same activity and based on, different types of requests that are being made for this different application, I can determine when I want activities to run so that each different activity type gets handled differently. And I can determine what results get shown for each of these activities based on the context in which they run. So based on the activity type, I'm going to see different approval buttons at the bottom of my form based on who I am, where I sit in the chain, and what the request type are. So you can have multiple buttons and determine whether or not you want those buttons to display based on where we are in the process or the type of process it is or any evaluable condition. So you can actually make process timelines very flexible in determining how you want to handle it. We often think of the process timeline just having, the sort of the default approve and deny results, but you can actually get way deep down into the weeds with 4 different request types to have 4 different types of responses that get displayed to the end user. If we go past that to HR action, HR doesn't have too many buttons. They have HR disposition complete because no matter what happens, HR is going to have to do their thing. It's always going to go to HR, and they're always going to have to do their disposition. However, no matter what HR does, they are going to have to provide an explanation of what they did. So in the HR disposition complete, and this is also true of the deny results, we'll go back and look at them quickly in a second. I've got signature comments required. Requiring signature comments is really easy to do, and we do recommend it, especially, well, in 2 circumstances, both of which are illustrated here. Number 1, if I absolutely don't care what they do, they have to provide a signature comment, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. I need HR to tell me what was done at the end of this request. So they don't get a choice. They get one result, that they have completed their disposition, and they need to tell me what that disposition is. So I am going to require signature comments from them no matter what. Now, they only have one result. So if we go back and look at one of the previous ones, let's look at internal action. Now, this is for a complaint. That's not a denial. In fact, technically, I think we'd say I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to do. I'm taking care of this complaint. That's great. But rather than just taking your word for it via a button click, I'm going to require, because you've performed a specific action that I want an explanation for, I am going to require signature comments in that context. And similarly, I've done the same thing in deny, because if you're going to approve a result, as I said earlier, we generally don't care what your reasoning is. If it's a time off request, I approved it. Okay, great. And I don't care why you approved it. We'll trust you. But if you deny it, so it's a time off request. Okay, I'm going to want to know, why are you denying this person their vacation? I mean, they have accrued vacation, presumably. We'll assume that they've accrued vacation. I mean, you may be denying it because they don't have any vacation approved or accrued. Okay, great. I get that. But that's probably a very rare occurrence. Most of the time, people ask for vacation that they have coming to them, and I want to know why you didn't want to give it to them. So the signature comments required really enables you to force the approver to explain themselves to really anyone who has access to manage the process, so that there is some transparency about their decision making. One of the reasons why we talked, whenever we first started talking about signature comments, when we looked at it on the form, is because I need to know what your justification is for doing usually something unusual. So I need to know what your justification is for doing that. And somebody is going to want to see that. And there needs to be a report on those signature comments somewhere, so that there is some oversight of why you denied a time off request. Or in the case of a complaint, why did you think that handling it internally was the best course of action? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe you chose that because you're trying to cover something up, and we might want to look into that. Signature comments provide transparency, and the way that they work is a little confusing because you've got this control on the form, which has its own weird rules about when it gets displayed and when it doesn't get displayed. And then you've got to be able to force people to make comments whenever they're doing things that might be sketchy or that might include some sketchy behavior. If somebody is not, fully trustworthy, you're going to want to have some oversight on that. So these two things work hand in hand together, along with the custom or the system variable for the activity users complete, to be able to extract those comments back, to be able to show them in a knowledge view, so that we can see for those requests that were denied or for things that were handled internally or whatever, we want to be able to see why things were done the way they were done, so that we can exercise some oversight on how our process works. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about, which will finish the timeline for us. So next week, we're purely going to talk about email templates. Is the very last activity I have here is a disposition notification. Not a bad idea to have one of these, to be able to tell your requestor what happened with their request. So after HR action, which is the last user activity that occurs, I am just going to send a notification, and I'm going to send a notification to the timeline initiator. Now, we're going to talk about email templates next week, and we're going to talk about configuring them and how to do different email templates and how to set up multiple templates and all of that good stuff, and the best way to do it. But for right now, think about when your activity ends, and like in this case, I've put in for time off, and everybody's approved it, and HR has said, okay, fine, here's your time off. We've put it down in the books. We have said you had 30 hours of PTO accrued, you're taking 16 hours off, you're taking 2 days off. So great, we've now marked that down, and you now, instead of having 30 hours accrued, we've now taken off 16 hours, and you now have 16 hours, 30 minus 14, you now have 14 hours of vacation left accrued. That's what they're doing. Okay, how do I know as the initiator? Because most of the time, and I see this whenever some of you ask me to look at your processes, because something has gone wrong, and I look at your process, and the last thing is HR action. And I always ask myself the question, okay, great. How does the requester know what happened? Well, the way the requester should know what happened is that you send them an email that tells them what happened. So the way that this loop works is that once my approvals are done, they go straight to HR. And then HR does whatever it is that they do. Once HR is done, I'm going to tell you what happened. If your vacation was approved and HR put in as their signature comments, vacation approved, you have 30 hours or 14 hours of PTO left, and they hit their HR action complete button, I should get an email that says that my vacation has been approved and I have 14 hours left. So this notification, so think about your activities. How are you letting the submitter know that everything is done? Their request has been fully processed. The best way to do that is to send them some sort of disposition notification by email, which is the closing activity of your process timeline. Once I get to disposition notification, everything that's gonna happen has happened. All I need to do is tell my initiator, my submitter, via an email what it is that happened, so that I ensure that my timeline initiator or my form submitter, which are usually the same person, they just need to know what the disposition was for their request so that they can close it out and go on with their day or take their time off, or know that their complaint was addressed and fixed, and whatever it is that the process does. So keep that in mind as a good last activity. Always tell your initiator what it is that happened with their request so that they are explicitly informed as to what the result was. And we'll get into the details of doing that and other things with the email templates next week. But for now, I think this is a good starting place, or a good stopping place at 11:42. So we shall, in fact, stop. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. So long.